Hey Nick.
How's it going, Bruno?
Well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, cool. So unfortunately, Jimmy won't be joining us today. He's feeling ill, so I hope he starts feeling better very soon. We actually have quite a few questions today, which is pretty cool. We've got four, so we're going to try to keep them short and sweet, but try answer all of them, and just see how far we get. Um, so yeah, let me ask you the first one.
Great.
This is from Red Fritz. He's quite a loyal viewer. He's asked a lot of questions over time. So this question is regarding a rental agreement and a rental mandate, right? So does a rental agreement include an agreement with the rental agent? So this is typical to those questions that we got before where we had to separate. The tenant has been renting the house since 2002, so that's quite a while now. And then the question is, we could not reach agreement about a contract terms, but I trust the tenant. So I think you might need to just play out one or two different scenarios here, yeah, due to the detail that we might be missing.
Okay, perfect. So let's just start with the initial question, because the initial question was, does a rental agreement include an agreement with the rental agent? Okay, and we've touched on this before. The agreement that exists with the tenant is your lease agreement, and the agreement that exists with your agent is an entirely separate agreement. Okay, one that is a mandate that you provide to your agent in the circumstances. In terms of your rental agreement with the tenant, this is the use and enjoyment of your asset, for which there is a remuneration payable, which is rental. Okay. And in terms of the agreement with your agent, this is a mandate agreement where the agent has to perform certain functions on your behalf for you for remuneration, which is not rental, it is payment. Okay. And sometimes that's based on a percentage of the rental, or depending on what they're going to do, the structuring for how you get paid or how the agent gets paid may differ. Okay. But what's important is these are wholly separate agreements. Okay. They're linked in a way, because your agent is going to be performing certain functions on your behalf, perhaps in terms of the lease agreement, but they are distinct. Okay. So what we see a lot in practice is a lot of agents include, for instance, they present the landlord a lease agreement, and inside that lease agreement, they're going to have provisions relating to the mandate and what their payment is or what functions they perform. Okay, and it's not strictly correct. Okay, and in fact, from our standpoint, we like to keep these, any terms that relate to the agent completely out of the lease agreement. Okay, it can become difficult at a later stage if you're now trying to determine the rights and responsibilities of the party in terms of the agency, and you've hidden these terms in terms of a lease agreement, which are not readily apparent to any of the parties. So it's better to keep these things separate. But from the question that Red has asked us, does a rental agreement have to include the agreement with the agent? No. Okay, these are wholly separate agreements, and really, in law, strictly, they should be kept separate. Okay, the agent doesn't have to be a part of a lease for a valid lease agreement, and the tenant doesn't have to be part of the agency agreement, for the agency agreement to be in place. So it's best to keep these separate. It's different parties, even though the landlord is a signatory to both particular agreements. Okay. Red then goes on to say, he says he's had a tenant renting his house since 2002. He says we could not reach agreement about the contractual terms, but I trust the tenant. So what my assumption is, and Red, you're welcome to write back in, I'm assuming that what you're saying here is that you couldn't reach contractual terms with the agent. Okay, but you trust the tenant. So in other words, you've had the tenant for a long time. You say they're from 2002, and you want to keep the tenant on, but you're struggling to reach contractual terms with the agent, is I think why you're asking the question. Okay, so again, as I've already set out, okay, if you can't reach contractual terms with your agent, that doesn't matter in respect of the particular lease agreement. Okay, you can still go ahead and rent the property to your tenant and enter into a lease agreement on whatever terms you want with that particular tenant. If you've had that tenant since 2002, it's the chances are very good. You've already got some sort of idea of what your contractual terms are going to be. Probably the only thing you need to negotiate is there going to be an increase in the rental, you know, and what rate that's going to be. That seems to be fine. And you're perfectly entitled to do that, whether you've agreed with your managing agent or not, what their terms are of that particular agreement. So there's absolutely no problem there. The only other assumption I could make is it's switched around where you haven't agreed with the terms with your tenant, and you know, you haven't agreed with your contractual terms with your tenant, but you say you trust them and they've been in there for a while. The only problem there is strictly when you enter into an agreement in law, what is required is either your contract is certain or is determinable. Okay, so you have to be able to determine what your contract says. Okay, if there is a vagueness or a point in a contract that's missing, okay, it stands to reason that no contract could have been entered into, because the parties have to have what we call in law a meeting of the minds, i.e., you both know what the terms of this contract are. Okay, if there isn't a meeting of the minds and one person thinks a contract says one thing, the other person says a contract says something else, that contract can be set aside by virtue of the fact that you didn't actually know what you were agreeing to in the circumstances. Okay, so if I interpret it the other way and you say you can't reach agreement with your tenants about the contractual terms, that's going to be a problem, because you need to nail down what the terms of your contract are in order to have a valid lease agreement. But I don't think it's that way. That it seems like an arbitrary thing to have asked. So I think it's the other way in the circumstances. Say you don't need to have nailed down your mandate's terms in order to conclude your lease agreement validly.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, and I totally agree with you leaning towards the answer about it being the estate agent terms that haven't been nailed down. Because I mean, obviously it follows on the first question of, can these be kept separate? But I mean, aside from that, if it is the terms with the tenant, and we're speaking about renewals and the renewal terms, right? Obviously, we have to look at the lease agreement. We have to look at, Rental Housing Act regarding how renewals work, how much time you're supposed to give, et cetera, whether the contracts now become month to month. Because I mean, since 2002, very few people are so clean as to renew perfectly each and every year. Half the times it just lands up being, I forgot the oak's been there for 5 years. And every time I phone him and go, oh, you should pay me more, he pays more. So now the fact that you phoned him and he's going, no, I can't afford to pay that. All that means is that you haven't properly effected a new renewal. When can you start giving him notice? If it's a month-to-month contract, then it's a month-to-month contract. You give him 1 month notice to say, sorry, I don't want you here, please leave. The fact that you trust him is inconsequential. So if you can't agree to terms, trust him or not, now you're asking for more commercial advice, going, should I keep a tenant just because he's been loyal and paid? In the market at the moment, I'd probably definitely do it for another year until a fresh bunch of tenants starts coming out. So we are in a market where we're still looking for trustworthy tenants, but in like 6 months to a year's time, you're probably going to start finding that a lot of people are going to start flooding the rental market, and then you'll have a greater selection of persons. But yeah, so that's it from my side. That's my thoughts.